The phone call that changed everything happened on a rainy Sunday afternoon. I remember the sound of the wipers keeping time on my windshield, the radio playing something soft and familiar, and the little hope in my chest that maybe, finally, my daughter would pick up without being rushed. The last thing I heard before the line went dead was my daughter's voice, quick and sharp with embarrassment, saying, "Mom, please don't do that again." And then a click. She'd blocked me. Just like that. My name is Lillian Lily Hayes, and I drove from Austin to New York City more times than I can count. I did it because I loved being a mother, because my daughter Claire was my greatest pride, and because there was a stubborn piece of me that believed distance meant nothing when your heart is full. I'm 68 now, retired from a career in school counseling, with a small garden in my backyard, and a tendency to knit 2 rows at once when I got nervous. For 30 years I drove long stretches of highway to see my family, to tuck cookies into my grandchildren's backpacks, to hold a hand during funerals and graduations. It was what mothers do. Claire grew up in the same sunlit kitchen where I still make my lemon bars. She was brilliant, sharp-witted, and impatient with small talk, qualities that seemed to carry her from Austin to Manhattan, and then into a career that moved at a tenth of my breath. She'd called me from airports, subway stations, and tiny coffee shops with news about auditions, promotions, and big city life. I used to laugh and tell her, "You go make the world your stage, baby. I'll drive the aisles." When she moved to New York 5 years ago for a job she said would change everything, I cried and then packed the emergency bag of casseroles and folded shirts for her, and I drove. At first the visits were frequent. Weekend trips, week-long stays, me showing my face at gallery openings or school plays. Even the occasional Saturday where I'd insist we go to brunch at 7:30, so we could talk before her day began. But slowly, over months and then years, her messages narrowed to short texts and emojis. There were new friends, new priorities, a new apartment that suddenly felt like a grown-up secret garden. I told myself it was the city life. I told myself patience. But there's a peculiar ache when a parent notices the distance in the way someone stops returning calls. It's not immediate. It's a slow thinning of threads until you wonder how long they'll hold. To be fair, I was not without faults. I called too often. I worried too loudly. And on one memorable occasion, I left a voicemail that I recognized later as a lecture. I had always been the kind of mother who stitched advice into sentences the way some people thread needles. In my defense, every call came from a place of love. I was the woman who drove 8 hours with a casserole cold and a hug warm. I thought my presence was comfort. Sometimes, mothers are heavier than we realize. That rainy afternoon's call started simple. Claire had been late to a rehearsal, and I, in my busybody way, wanted to remind her to eat, to breathe, to remember to tuck an extra sweater in her bag. I joked. I fussed. I teased her about the way New Yorkers always looked like they were late for something important. Then, in the middle of the joke, there was a moment when she snapped. Not cruelly, but with the brittle edge of someone exhausted. She said, "Mom, you're embarrassing me. Don't call me at work. Don't air this in front of people." I apologized, of course. I tried to make it light. Then, startlingly, she said she needed space and hung up. I waited 2 hours. Then 4. I called again, left a softer message. Hours later, a text. "Please stop calling. I need distance." I dialed one more time. The call went through and, before I could speak, Claire's voice was tight. "Mom, I can't talk. Please. I'll call later." There was a rustle, a muffled laugh, and then a click. I thought it was a bad connection. I tried another number. The call would not go through. A few minutes later, a message arrived on my phone. "You've been blocked." I remember the absurd physical sensation of being unplugged. It felt as if someone had cut a ribbon in front of me. Private, sharp, and final. The house seemed louder after that. The kettle boiling like an accusation. The clock ticking with the clarity of something irreversible. How do you explain being blocked by your daughter? To someone my age, it felt like exile. To be pushed away so abruptly left me breathless and trembling. More for the loss of relationship than for the technology's sting. My first instinct, as always, was to drive. I packed a bag, the way I always had, filled it with practical things. Her favorite tea, a lemon bar tucked in wax paper, a sweater I thought she might need. I drove the long stretch, listening to old radio shows and the sound of my own hands on the steering wheel, repeating the same prayer. Let this be a misunderstanding. Let Claire have a bad day. Let this be temporary. I told myself not to dramatize things. After all, people snap sometimes. People whose lives move at 100 miles an hour get exhausted. Perhaps she'd be relieved to see me, and everything would fit back into place. When I finally arrived in New York and stepped into her apartment, I realized I had misread the chessboard. The door was locked. Her neighbor, a kindly woman I'd met once by the elevator, looked at me with an uncomfortable sympathy. She said she was fine, the neighbor said. She asked me not to let anyone in. There was a photograph propped on the kitchen table, Claire radiant, holding a stage playbill. On the wall were framed invitations, press clippings, and a neat stack of mail. No sign of my name on any of it. It felt as if she'd scrubbed me from the surfaces where memories live. That evening I called the number again. The blocked message persisted. I stood on her stoop and felt the city pulse around me. People rushing to trains, the smell of pretzels in the air, laughter peeling out of a bar, and thought of the many Sundays I'd driven for hugs and quiet conversations. The pain in my chest was not just loneliness, it was humiliation. Not because she'd blocked me, but because she'd made me small enough that she could do it without a backward glance. In the days that followed, whispers of privacy and boundaries became a chorus. I spoke to neighbors, texted old friends, and called my daughter's cell phone from different numbers. Each blocked ring taught me that modern distance could be permanent, and that technology could serve as a door slammed hard between people. The more I learned, the more a dangerous question formed in my mind. Why would Claire, who once treasured my Sunday lemon bars and my loud, certain advice, block me so completely? If it was merely embarrassment, why the cruel permanence? There were rumors, a misinterpreted photo posted to a social feed, a poorly timed voicemail that might have been overheard at a rehearsal, a chance moment I'd thought harmless. I replayed that call 1,000 times in my head, listening for venom, trying to hear what might have made her so ashamed. Each iteration made me ache, because I could not find malice in my words. I only found concern, the stubborn worry of a mother who had always feared for the child she raised. And yet the more I puzzled over the cause, the more the pattern suggested something else. That my daughter's life had become a stage where image mattered more than history, where reputations could be fragile as glass and influence could be wielded like a blade. If that was true, then my presence, my calls, my loving interjections, had become a risk she could not accept. That thought sliced deeper than the technical block. It suggested that I didn't just embarrass her. I endangered the new identity she had carefully constructed far from home. If you're still listening to this story, please take a moment. Hit subscribe and give this video a like. I know it sounds small, but stories like mine are fragile. They need witnesses. And in the next part, I'll tell you what I discovered when I chose not to accept silence. You'll hear how small acts become threads of truth, and how a mother refused to be erased without a fight. That decision, to seek answers rather than to retreat, set the course of everything that followed. It led me down a path I had not expected, into other people's lives, into a world of secrets and half-truths, and finally into a discovery that would not only explain Claire's distance, but would also force me to understand what she had become, and what I had lost. The question now was no longer why she had blocked me. It was what had happened to make my daughter choose distance over family, and I was determined to find out. For days after being blocked, I sat in my kitchen in Austin, the same one that had once smelled of Sunday pies and laughter. The walls felt thinner somehow, like they could hear my confusion. I'd set my phone on the table, staring at that small gray screen, hoping for a sign of her, a missed call, a message, anything. Nothing came. Then one evening, I did something that changed everything. I opened Facebook. I hadn't used it much. My friends at church posted recipes and grandkids' birthdays, but that night, I typed my daughter's name into the search bar. Her profile had been curated. Glossy photos. High-profile friends. A smiling, confident woman posing on stages at premieres, surrounded by people I didn't recognize. I scrolled, heart pounding, until something caught my eye, a post from a local magazine. Claire Hayes, New York's rising creative director, shares her powerful story of rebuilding her life after cutting ties with a toxic family past. My eyes froze. Toxic family past. At first, I thought I'd read it wrong. I clicked the article link, and there she was, my Claire, telling the world about surviving emotional manipulation, about learning to set boundaries from a parent who didn't understand privacy. That parent was me. My breath caught. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I read every word, even the ones that hurt most. When you grow up with someone who projects their fears onto you, you learn to rebuild your identity from scratch. Cutting ties wasn't cruel, it was necessary for survival. I sat there trembling, my teacup untouched. The sting wasn't just that she'd blocked me. It was that she had rewritten our history for strangers to applaud. Thousands of people had liked her post, some commenting things like, "So proud of your strength, Claire," or "You did the right thing, protect your peace." And I, the mother who had raised her alone, who'd sold jewelry to pay for her acting lessons, was now the villain in her story. For a long time, I couldn't speak. I just stared at her smile, that confident, camera-ready grin that looked so different from the girl I knew. That girl used to curl up beside me on the couch to watch the Golden Girls, sniffling during commercials. This woman, the one in the magazine, looked untouchable. A part of me wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, that perhaps she'd exaggerated for the sake of art or publicity. But the more I read, the clearer it became. This wasn't fiction. This was her truth, told to millions. I wanted to scream, but instead, I closed the laptop and just sat there. That night, I didn't sleep. I thought about every sacrifice, every drive, every moment I'd chosen her over myself. I thought about the time I missed my sister's funeral because Claire had the flu in college, or the day I used my retirement savings to help her move to New York. And now this was my reward, to be erased, rewritten, rebranded as the reason she had to heal. The betrayal wasn't in her words, it was in her silence. She hadn't called to warn me, hadn't said, "Mom, I'm writing something that might hurt." She had taken my heart, dissected it for applause, and called it self-care. A week later, I got an email from an old friend, someone who'd worked with Claire at her new company. It simply said, "Lily, you should see this." Attached was a recording from a podcast interview. The host was cheerful, asking about Claire's inspiration. Claire's voice came through calm, confident, polished. "My mom, she means well, but she always wanted to control everything. Even as an adult, she'd call my office, show up unannounced, try to manage my schedule. I had to block her to protect my sanity." The host laughed lightly, saying, "That must have been hard." And Claire replied, "It was. But you have to choose yourself, right? You can love someone and still not let them destroy your peace." I froze. That was the word, destroy. She had painted me as something destructive. I didn't recognize her voice anymore. But somewhere under that pain, a slow-burning question began forming. If she truly wanted distance, why make it public? Why tell the world instead of just telling me? That question led me down a rabbit hole, one that would unravel everything. A friend of mine, Janet, worked part-time at a marketing agency in New York. I called her, trying to sound casual. "Hey Janet, you ever heard of the Beacon Collective?" She paused. "You mean that PR firm that handles influencer campaigns?" "Yeah, big names." "Why, that's where Claire works," I said softly. Janet sighed. "Oh honey, then it makes sense." Sense. "Lily, that toxic family angle? It's part of their branding push. People sell their pain now, it's engagement. The more personal, the more viral. Some of those stories aren't even true." I gripped the phone tighter. "You're saying she's using me? For her career?" "I'm saying she's playing the game. Pain sells and family drama sells more." The room seemed to spin. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, had turned me into content. At that moment, something inside me shifted. Grief began hardening into resolve. I wasn't just hurt anymore, I was angry. Still, I told myself, don't react. Don't post. Don't defend. Not yet. Because something told me this went deeper. And I was right. 2 weeks later, I received a letter. It was from Claire's assistant, polite, formal, typed in crisp business font. "Dear Mrs. Hayes, Ms. Hayes kindly requests that you refrain from contacting her professional associates or family friends. Continued attempts to reach her will be considered harassment. I remember laughing, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. A lifetime of devotion, reduced to a legal warning. That's when the real betrayal crystallized. My daughter hadn't just distanced herself, she'd erased me. And in my erasure, she'd found fame. But if she thought I'd fade quietly, she didn't know her mother. Because, my dear listeners, what I discovered next, about how she manipulated her story, and how many lies she'd told, turned my heartbreak into purpose. So if you're still here, take a second to subscribe and like this video, because the next part, is where the story shifts. It's where a mother learns how to fight back. Not with anger, but with truth. And trust me, that's far more powerful. The days after that letter were a blur of silence. Not the gentle kind, but the kind that hums in your ears, cold, sharp, and alive. I'd wake up, pour coffee into my favorite mug, and catch myself staring at the phone like it might suddenly light up with her name. It never did. Every mother knows the rhythm of her child's voice, even after years. I'd replay old voicemails just to hear Claire's laughter, that half giggle she used to have when she tried to tell a story through tears. I would have given anything to hear it again. But what played in my head now were her new words: toxic, control, boundaries. They looped endlessly, each syllable cutting a little deeper. I tried pretending life was normal. I tended my garden, baked lemon bars for the church bake sale, and went on my morning walks. But even as the world spun on, something inside me stayed still. You see, when you've been a mother long enough, silence doesn't fool you. It's not peace. It's avoidance. And avoidance means there's something to hide. One night, unable to sleep, I sat at my old oak desk and started writing a letter. Not to Claire. I knew she wouldn't read it. But to myself. I wrote every memory, every sacrifice, every small kindness she'd forgotten. The time I skipped meals so she could go to acting camp. The night I drove through a snowstorm to bring her home from college because her car broke down. And as I wrote, a truth surfaced. Claire hadn't just blocked me, she'd blocked her own history. That's when the anger started to take shape. Not the explosive kind, but the quiet, precise kind that mothers of my generation know well. The kind that doesn't yell, it plans. Now, I want you to really hear this next part, because it's important. If you've ever been hurt by family, if someone's rewritten your love as control, you'll understand the power of reclaiming your story. And if you're watching this right now, please tap like and subscribe. Not for me, but because every share makes sure women like us are never erased again. Alright, back to that night. I decided I wouldn't confront Claire head-on. That's what she expected. The emotional mother, begging for reconciliation, looking like the stereotype she'd painted online. No. If she turned our story into performance, I would respond in a language she understood, presentation. So I started researching the Beacon Collective, her PR firm. Every public story they managed, every campaign, every quote about healing from toxicity. It didn't take long to see a pattern. They recycled pain for clicks, sold tears as branding. And my daughter was their star example. Then came the twist of fate. I was having coffee one morning when Janet, my friend from New York, called again. "You're not gonna believe this," she said. "The Beacon Collective is holding a public gala next month. Claire's the keynote speaker. Theme: rebuilding from broken bonds." I nearly dropped my spoon. A gala. My daughter would stand on a stage, in front of hundreds of people, telling the world how she escaped me. That's when the spark of revenge caught fire. I didn't want to ruin her career. I wanted her to remember me. Truthfully, I wanted her to see herself through the eyes of the woman who raised her. Not a monster, not a villain, but the mother who'd given her everything. I began collecting proof. Photos, letters, report cards signed "Love You, Mom." Birthday cards that said "Best Mom Ever." I even found a recording from her high school graduation, where she'd given a speech thanking me for being my rock. The irony stung like salt. Each piece went into a binder I labeled "The Story She Forgot." But one piece was still missing, something that would make people feel the truth. I found it in an old video camera at the back of my closet. On a dusty cassette, labeled Claire, age 12. I played it on my old VCR, and there she was, sitting cross-legged on the porch, sun in her hair, laughing. She was holding a homemade Mother's Day card, looking at the camera. "Mom," she said, "when I grow up, I want to be just like you. I promise I'll never forget how much you do for me." I cried for hours. Not the soft kind of crying, the body-shaking kind that comes from somewhere ancient. Then I knew. That tape would be my truth. The plan came together slowly, piece by piece, like a quilt stitched from memory and pain. I called Janet again. "You said that gala's public, right?" "Technically, yes." "Why?" "I just need to get inside." "Lily," she sighed. "You're not really gonna." "Oh, I am." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "I'm not here to cause a scene. I'm just going to remind my daughter what honesty looks like." From that day forward, everything had purpose. I practiced walking into that room without trembling. I learned how to upload videos. I drafted an email, addressed not to Claire, but to the audience she'd built her story on. And as I prepared, something unexpected happened. My anger softened into clarity. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was restoration. She had taken my story. I was simply taking it back. But oh, my friends, when the night of the gala arrived, even I didn't know how far the truth would travel, or how public karma could be. The night of the gala felt like walking into another world. All glass walls, glittering dresses, and champagne bubbles. Manhattan has a way of pretending it's heaven when it's really theater, and everyone there was playing a part. I wore a navy dress, simple but elegant, one I'd saved for my 50th wedding anniversary. An anniversary that never came because life had other plans. I pinned my hair back, put on Claire's favorite perfume, the same one she'd once stolen from my dresser in college, and carried a small clutch. Inside it, a USB drive, a folded letter, and the tape labeled Claire, age 12. Janet met me at the entrance, her eyes full of concern. "You really want to do this?" she whispered. I smiled gently. "No, Janet. I need to." The event hall sparkled like a dream. People clinked glasses. PR executives floated through the crowd, and on the main stage hung a massive banner. The Beacon Gala, rebuilding from broken bonds. And there she was, my daughter. Claire looked stunning, wrapped in a silver gown, her hair in perfect waves, smiling for the cameras. I stood at the back of the room, unseen among the guests, watching her every move. She was radiant, confident, and to the untrained eye happy. But mothers see what others miss. I noticed the faint tremor in her hands, the tightness in her smile, the practiced way she avoided eye contact when people mentioned family. The speeches began. Executives praised resilience, empowerment, rebirth. The crowd applauded politely. Then came Claire's introduction. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight's keynote speaker, Claire Hayes." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. She took the stage, adjusted the mic, and smiled her practiced smile. "When I left home," she began, "I had to choose between comfort and growth. Sometimes love can hold you back, and you have to let go to find yourself." The crowd nodded, moved by her confidence. I watched quietly, hands clasped in my lap, my heart pounding. She continued, weaving a tale of healing from toxicity, breaking free from control, and finding peace. It was beautiful, poetic, and built entirely on lies. Then came the moment. She paused, smiled at the crowd, and said, "I dedicate this talk to anyone who's ever had to walk away from someone they loved." The applause swelled, and I stood up. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. I just rose from my chair and began walking toward the stage. At first, no one noticed. The sound of clapping covered my footsteps. But when I reached the edge of the spotlight, a few heads turned. Then more. The room began to quiet. Claire froze. Her eyes widened when she saw me. For a moment, all her polished composure fell away. "Mom," she whispered. I stopped at the foot of the stage and smiled softly. "You look beautiful, honey." A nervous murmur rippled through the audience. A man from the PR table stood, trying to intervene, but I raised a hand gently. "It's all right. I'm not here to make a scene. I just wanted to return something." I reached into my clutch and took out the small USB drive. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is a piece of your story you might have forgotten." I walked toward the AV table, where a large screen behind the stage looped her branding reel. The technician hesitated, but Janet was already beside him, whispering something. A moment later, the video on the big screen flickered. The audience gasped. There, larger than life, appeared a little girl, 12 years old, sitting cross-legged on a porch, sunlight in her hair. "Mom," the young Claire said, beaming into the camera, "when I grow up, I want to be just like you. I promise I'll never forget how much you do for me." The room went silent. Completely silent. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Her composure cracked, and tears welled in her eyes. The clip ended with the two of us laughing, her small arms wrapping around my neck, my voice off camera saying, "You'll always be my girl." I turned to face the crowd. My voice didn't tremble once. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "my daughter is a remarkable woman, but stories, even painful ones, deserve truth. No mother is perfect, and no daughter is either. I didn't come here to humiliate her. I came here to remind her, and all of you, that love, no matter how complicated, is not something to be rebranded or erased." There was a long pause. Then a single person began to clap. Slowly, others joined. The applause grew, not polite but genuine. Claire stood frozen, mascara streaking down her face. I looked at her one last time and said quietly, "You can rewrite your life, darling, but don't erase the people who taught you how to hold a pen." And with that, I stepped down from the stage and walked out. Behind me, cameras flashed. People whispered. Some were crying. Others were stunned. But I didn't look back. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin. I felt lighter than I had in years. The next morning, the clip was everywhere. Someone had recorded the whole thing. Mother interrupts gala to reveal the truth behind toxic family story. It spread like wildfire. Thousands of comments flooded in, not attacking, but understanding. People said things like, "We only heard one side. Maybe we should listen to both." Claire went silent online for weeks. The company she worked for faced backlash for exploiting personal trauma for PR. But me? I stayed quiet. I didn't need to gloat. The truth had done the talking. And I'll tell you something. Revenge doesn't always come from anger. Sometimes it comes from honesty. From standing up without shouting. From showing love in a way that exposes lies. Now I know some of you listening right now are feeling something. Maybe a lump in your throat, maybe a memory of your own family. If this story touched you, take a second to like this video and subscribe, because in the next part, I'll tell you what happened after the storm settled. Whether Claire and I ever spoke again. Whether forgiveness was possible. And what I learned about love, boundaries, and karma. Because believe me, karma showed up exactly when it needed to. You know that quiet moment after a storm? When the rain stops, but the smell of wet earth still lingers. Heavy, clean, and haunting. That's what my life felt like in the weeks after the gala. The clip had gone viral. People from all over sent messages, some offering support, others sharing their own stories of distant children, lost connections, or painful misunderstandings. I didn't respond to most. I didn't need to. I spent my mornings walking by the lake, the same path I used to take when Claire was little, when she'd collect stones and name each one after her favorite storybook characters. It's funny how places hold memories better than people do. Then one day my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't seen in a long time. Claire. The message was short. "Mom, can we talk?" My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped the phone. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe on the corner of Maple and 3rd. The same one where we'd shared hot chocolate when she got her first job offer in New York. I got there early, heart pounding, palms sweaty, every possible outcome running through my mind. And then she walked in. No makeup. No cameras. No heels. Just jeans, a sweater, and that familiar look of guilt mixed with exhaustion. For a long moment, we just stood there. Two women connected by blood, broken by pride, and unsure how to start. She finally whispered, "I didn't know you'd come." I smiled faintly. "I didn't know you'd ask." We sat down. The air was thick, like the weight of years between us. She stirred her coffee, avoiding my eyes. "I made a mess, didn't I?" she said quietly. "You told your story," I replied softly. "You just forgot it wasn't only yours." Tears filled her eyes. "I thought you were embarrassed by me. That call, when you laughed at my interview, I thought." I reached across the table, and placed my hand over hers. I wasn't laughing at you, sweetheart. I was proud, nervous. I was just trying to sound brave. I never meant to hurt you. She wiped her eyes and nodded. I see that now. I really do. We sat in silence for a while, sipping our coffee. No big apology, no dramatic music. Just two people trying to find their way back. Before we left, she reached into her purse and handed me something, a small old locket. I recognized it instantly. It had been missing for years. Inside was a picture of her at 12, and me, both of us laughing on that same porch from the video. I found it when I was packing after the gala, she said. I figured it was time it came home. I smiled, but my eyes blurred with tears. Thank you, baby. When she hugged me goodbye, it wasn't perfect, a little stiff, unsure. But it was real. And sometimes that's enough. Over the next few months, we started rebuilding slowly. Small calls, holiday visits, cautious texts that turned into long phone conversations. She even came down to Austin that spring to help me plant the garden again. The same garden she used to play in barefoot when she was 5. You know, people talk about revenge like it's about punishment. But I learned something through all this. Revenge, the kind that heals, isn't about hurting someone back. It's about making the truth visible. It's about standing in your light so bright that lies can't survive around you. And karma? Oh, it works quietly. Her company, the one that built its brand on her toxic mother's story, dropped her from their PR campaign after that gala. But she didn't fall apart. She started fresh, consulting small nonprofits, helping women reconnect with family. It's almost poetic, isn't it? And me? I found peace. I started writing again, little letters, memories, stories like this one. Because I realized something. Stories only hurt when they're unfinished. Now they heal. So if you're still listening, and I know some of you are, let me tell you this. Don't let pride steal love from you. Don't let silence become your only language. And if this story touched you, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it tonight. Because somewhere out there, another mother is waiting for a message that says, "Mom, can we talk?" And sometimes, that's all it takes to begin again.